Item number 10, Taupo Sculpture Trust. I see Mr. Hoadley and Mr. Chris. Okay, do you want to, I see also, I certainly see.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Mr. Bailey, welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir, and Happy New Year to everyone. What we have before us here is a proposal by ourselves and the Sculpture Trust for the location of 5 pieces of sculptural artwork to be delivered over the forthcoming years. We have a short report, and then we have appendices 1 to 5 that shows approximate locations along the lakefront for these 5 objects. They are locations that have been identified as being pertinent to storytelling and places where visitors and locals alike can take respite and relax at existing areas along the lakefront, and areas that we feel is safe and that what the trust feel are appropriate for significant pieces of artwork to be delivered as part of the agreement, the arrangement between council and the Sculpture Trust over the forthcoming. Well, we're into year 2 now of a 10-year understanding. The locations are the identified locations are not for the sole enjoyment specifically of the Sculpture Trust. They could be provided. Artworks could be provided by other parties, other bodies, but these sites have been identified by the trust. There are 5, and these 5 don't really form the complete picture as we see as artwork, large pieces of artwork to be delivered in Taupo over the next 10 years or so. These are just the preliminary sites identified. Other sites will follow to come through to yourselves in the future, and they may be more focused within the town centre itself, for example. But these sites that we are asking you to approve today are ones that are principally focused along the lakefront, and there's one within the domain itself. The proposal as is, and we're asking members to approve the 5 locations, aren't specific locations. Well, they are. They're sort of areas of influence. They're areas that that we will come back to you with more detailed site briefs at a future time. But at the moment, they're just identifying areas that we feel would be suitable for artworks. I'll leave it at this stage and open and ask you to invite questions from the members of the trust that are here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey, and thank you very much for the Taupo Sculpture Trust members that are here. Done a fantastic job so far. Just for a little bit of clarity, if this is approved here today, they still have to come back to council with whatever that piece of art is and that sort of thing. It doesn't give them just carte blanche right to go and plant a totem pole, for argument's sake, on one of these places. It's still a process. As I understand that, this is giving some surety to the trust that they can go away and sort of formulate or plan or maybe hold a competition or whatever for pieces of art that might suit those places. It would still have to come back through to council and some public processes.
That is absolutely right. It is a 2-stage process, and this represents the first stage of a 2-stage process.
Because what they're doing is actually putting down the foundations for something that could be very, very good for the future. But it's nice to know where the trust can go off and start making some plans for them, trying to raise money and things like that. So
absolutely.
That's great. Any further questions around Councillor Kirk, was it? Or who? Oh, sorry. Councillor Williams?
Could I ask?
I heard a lady's voice.
Have any of these sites got any historical significance? For instance, with regard to the constabulary, where they had some presence, or Victoria Tower? And so they're principally chosen for their visibility and the ability for the public to interact.
But also we've taken a lead from the Wellington Council. There's strength in numbers, and when you get specific sites which are in a overall group, it's very strong, and it's more likely for people to come and view those pieces of works than dotted all around the place. And of course they're wonderful sites.
Could you just expand a little bit on perhaps why you didn't look at the town centre, the actual shopping centre, as to perhaps one or more within
Yes,
the shopping centre?
Because that's the Wayfinders 1 project, the CBD. That is, this is Chris and Gareth's baby, not ours. In fact, we are acting actually as consultants to them. But these other sites are the Taupo Sculpture Trust's responsibility, if you so vote that way.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just be really clear, the sites, and Chris mentioned it in his presentation, the sites that are identified have been picked by the Sculpture Trust, but when we've looked at them, we've looked at are they appropriate from a reserve management perspective, from a roading perspective, all that sort of stuff, how do they fit into the environment. What they do, if approved today, give the Sculpture Trust some certainty in terms of being able to look at their part funding for those, so they can go to a funder and say, this is the type of place that we're looking at, and work through from there. You do get another opportunity to approve it. But just to be really clear, like the match funding that you've got in the LTCCP, that's open to anybody, so it's the Sculpture Trust or anybody else can apply for that funding, and the same would apply for these sites, so that what we're saying, if we take it away a level, is these sites aren't exclusive to the trust, but what we're saying is that they are appropriate for some form of sculpture. And we're not saying that there are any places in town that would be appropriate for some sort of sculpture. So there's a myriad of other locations, and they would be assessed on a case-by-case basis if a private person wished to put a sculpture there, or be it council or the trust.
I've maybe have some issues with that. I've just received the council's copy of public art policy. I do respect the other Taupo Sculpture Trust and what you've achieved today, and the people on it, and you've made it your focus to create public works of excellence for this town, and you certainly didn't have anything very much prior to your contribution. I really wouldn't like to see this council, myself included, becoming experts in what should public art be. I don't really think it's a wise position for us to sit there as judges in a competition. I would like to see some integrity in the process.
Just to clarify, we've been really clear through the process that the council wouldn't be approving, so to speak, a piece of art. That is up to the Sculpture Trust or anybody else. If a private landowner wished to put a piece of sculpture in the CBD, as an example, then what we would be looking at is the appropriateness of that in that location. So how does that fit with the way that the place gets used and is managed into the future? So that's very clear that we don't expect and or should, in our opinion, the council be in the business of selecting pieces of art. Other than if we were doing our own street upgrade, then we may well include public art as part of that street upgrade. And that would be appropriate, and obviously we would take advice from appropriate parties, and that's what Claire mentioned before. We are taking advice from the Sculpture Trust for the wayfinding project, which the last council approved, which includes an element of sculpture, and obviously we take the advice of the Sculpture Trust as part of that, because they are the experts rather than us.
And may I add that we have a very specific memorandum of understanding, the Trust and the Council, and it is spelled out very clearly the processes there that we go through. If you would like a copy of that, I'd be happy to give you a copy.
Councillor Craig?
I was just going to say to the Chair, well done, you people. You've made a great start on the sculpture, and it's going ahead. When we take over the Highway 1, which I believe is the end of this year, is it possible then to look at the sites that have got real high profile? You know what I'm going to say, don't you? The roundabout outside Countdown Woolworths. just lends itself to something making a statement of our town. If I could just give an unbiased, completely unbiased view, but there's a lot of people that like a bicycle sort of in that particular location, you know. Yeah. So, but that is possible once we take over the
Absolutely.
town. Okay, I just thought I'd...
Yeah.
Councillor Henderson.
Just three quick questions. The first one is on page 10/1, just under point 5, financial considerations. I just needed some clarification here. I'm not quite sure what this is saying, but it appears to me current LTCCP has provided for 50% match funding for each artwork up to a maximum of $100,000 annually over 10 years. So firstly, I'm not sure if that's for each artwork or what the total funding is potentially over 10 years. But if I do my figures right, the total commitment could be potentially anywhere between $2.5 and $5 million.
It's per year, per annum.
Per annum, that's what I mean.
And it's a maximum of $100,000 only if they put up dollar to dollar to match. If they put up 20 grand, we only put up 20 grand.
That's right, but that's per annum, potentially.
Per annum, yes.
Potentially.
And that, you could change that in your LTCCP next year, is your LTCCP year. You're working at the moment, now that you've been elected, on the LTCCP that we adopted in 10, which can't be changed until every 3 years. So in 2012 you could change it. You could increase that, you could decrease it.
But that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that my reading of those figures is correct, that the potential commitment of council over a 10-year period, if I read that correctly, on these projects could be, as the LTCCP stands now, between $2.5 and $5 million. As I read it.
1 million. 10 times 100 grand is $1 million.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, potentially $1 million. Yeah,
$1 million over 10 years.
Hang on, no, hang on, because there's 5 sculptures, remember? 5 different sculptures.
No.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so the commitment potentially is up to $1 million.
So, Mr. Chairman, the 5 sites are quite different. It's looking at where these
And
sites
you cannot, and just so you understand how an LTCCP works, if that 100,000 wasn't used in this year and only 20 grand was, you can't carry that 80 grand into next year.
Yep.
You tried.
I apologise for that.
Okay, so I've got 2 more quick questions. How much has been committed so far to these projects?
There's 100. Just to clarify, there's $100,000 in your budget each year for public art, not just for the sculpture trust. Anybody can apply for that. And what we've said in the LTCCP is, if someone comes along and we agree with the piece of work and where it's going to go, we'll match fund that. So 50-50 between us and whoever that may be, up to the maximum of 100,000. I think last year the outlay from council was 50,000, which was half of the value of the flip. Queen of Roberts Reserve.
Okay. Third question, quickly. Wayfinding. I think the budget for that was $710,000.
711.
Yeah. You're saying there's an element of sculpture in that. So there's more sculpture funding in that. And how do the two actually fit together? And how much of the $711,000 has been spent or is earmarked to be spent on sculptures?
The 711 is for basically, if you count it into 2 projects. One is for gateways, which is and we're looking at, and we'll be bringing an item specifically back to council at some time in the very near future, and that's looking at the main gateway sites into town, which does include sculpture. So we're looking at pieces of sculpture there to draw people into town. And then the second part of that project is what we call wayfinding within town. So that's essentially signage. So if you think of signage pointing you to toilets, to car parks, to the library, that sort of stuff. What we're looking at the moment, and again we'll be bringing this back to council for specific approval, is rather than what you'll see in other towns and cities, which is just a totem pole essentially with signage off it, is having something a little bit more clever than that, and having those totem poles, if you like, being artistic so that they add to the overall sculpture feel, and include elements of signage and information, etc. within them. So I am unable to sit here and say out of that 711, 500,000 or whatever is pure sculpture, because a lot of it's either sculpture or it's that wayfinding, which is you'll be able to see those pieces as a piece of sculpture in themselves.
So how does that differentiate from the gateways part, the first part you just mentioned?
The gateways is we're looking at the Napier Taupo Road, the airport, and Wairake. So those specific locations, and having a piece of sculpture at those locations.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further on it? Okay, well, I think this is a good agenda item because I said before it's not up to this council to judge what's a nice piece of art, and I might think it is and somebody else mightn't think it is. That art's like that, it can be controversial, and that's why a couple of years ago the Taupo Sculpture Trust was formed by people who do like art, care about art, and have the expertise. So I also just want to reiterate, I think it's been said here before, it's not just a Taupo Sculpture Trust that can submit to put something in and apply for the funding that is there, although this group combined is very powerful, I must say, and doing a really good job. So I think all this really does is let them go away and focus on what might be able to go in those specific, instead of having this bigger holistic view, what do we do next? This is actually tying down some areas, and they can work on those areas and see what they can come up with. So, and then of course come back to us. So I think it's a good agenda item. If there's no further discussions or talk on it, I'll be asking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved, Councillor Williams. Seconded, Councillor Kirk. Any further discussion on the matter? There being none, all in favour? So carried. Thank you very, very much, and thank you, Mr. Bailey, and thank you, Taupo Sculpture Trust. And any